They called me a killer. Not to my face, of course. In Boston, they were far too polite for that. They used words like incompetent, careless, a disgrace to the profession. But I saw it in their eyes, in the way the stable hands at the Harrington estate wouldn't look at me, in the way Mr. Harrington, a man whose hand I had shaken 100 times, stood there like a statue carved from ice. A killer. It was the fifth one, a magnificent Arabian stallion, worth more than the house I grew up in. He lay still in his stall, a monument to my failure. The air was thick with the smell of death and disease, a smell I couldn't wash out of my clothes, my hair, my very soul. 5 of the finest breeding stallions in Massachusetts. Gone. On my watch. I don't understand, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It was more for me than for Mr. Harrington. The treatment should have worked. A common cold, Dr. Montgomery. His voice sliced through the silence, sharp and cruel. That's what you told me. A common cold. Now 5 of my finest are dead. I had followed every protocol, administered every tincture, every poultice, exactly as my training dictated. I was Dr. Eleanor Montgomery, one of the most promising veterinarians on the East Coast. A woman in a man's world, yes, but one who had earned her place through skill and dedication. And still they died. One by one, they slipped away, as if some malevolent force was mocking my every effort. They're saying in town that a woman has no place in this work, Harrington continued, stepping closer, his shadow falling over me. That your emotions clouded your judgment. The world tilted. My carefully constructed life, my years of study, my hard-won reputation, it was all crumbling to dust around me. He told me he'd written to the veterinary board, that my license was under review. He told me his wife hadn't stopped crying for days. Then he uttered the words that would haunt my every waking moment. Find another profession, he said, his voice cracking with a grief that made his fury even more potent. One where your mistakes don't destroy livelihoods. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the dead horse and the crushing weight of my failure. That night I packed a single trunk. I didn't take my diploma. I didn't take the awards I had won. But I couldn't bring myself to leave my medical instruments. They were a part of me, a phantom limb I couldn't bear to sever completely. I tucked them into a false bottom, a secret shame. Then I answered an advertisement. A small-town shopkeeper in a place called Willow Creek, Texas, was looking for a mail-order bride. I wrote back, signing my letters not with the formal Dr. Eleanor Montgomery, but with Nora, the name only my friends had used, the friends who no longer spoke to me. It was a lie, a chance to be someone else, anyone else. 5 days. That's how long it took to leave Boston behind. 5 days on a rattling stagecoach, the dust of the road coating everything, trying to become someone new. And that's when the stagecoach jerked to a stop, throwing me forward. Outside, men were shouting. The driver yelled something about a sick horse. My blood ran cold. It was the sound that did it, a horse's labored, rattling breath, a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. Before I could stop myself, my hand was on the door. Medical instinct, a ghost of the woman I used to be, overrode every ounce of caution. 20 feet ahead, a chestnut gelding had collapsed in its traces, its flanks heaving. Thick, yellowish mucus dripped from its nostrils. I could see the heat rising from its body, could smell the infection on the air. Strangles. The diagnosis was instant, the disease that had destroyed my life. It had followed me. My fingers twitched, itching for the medical bag in my trunk. I could lance the abscesses. I could administer a tincture for the fever. I could save this animal. But then what? The whispers would start. The questions. Who was this woman who knew so much about horses? Where did she come from? Ma'am? The driver looked up at me, his face etched with worry. You look like you know something about horses. This one's in a bad way. My throat closed up. The headlines from Boston flashed before my eyes. 5 dead horses. Disgraced doctor. I took a step back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm sorry, I whispered, the lie burning my tongue. I don't. I climbed back into the coach, shutting my eyes against the animal's suffering. As the coach lurched forward, leaving the dying horse behind, its tortured breaths echoed in my mind. I was a coward. I was a failure. I was no longer Dr. Montgomery. I was just Nora, a woman running from ghosts. But that's the thing about ghosts. No matter how far you run, they always find you. Willow Creek wasn't just a town, it was a suggestion. A handful of dusty buildings leaning against an endless Texas sky. As the stagecoach pulled up to Reed's General Store and Post Office, a small crowd gathered to stare. And in the center of them, one man stood apart. "That'd be Nathaniel Reed," the driver said, following my gaze. "Decent sort. Keeps to himself." He gave me a knowing look. "You'd be his mail-order bride, I reckon." I could only nod, my mouth too dry for words. Taking a deep breath, I stepped down from the coach and into my new life. Nathaniel Reed was not what I expected. His letters were formal, articulate, but gave little away. The man himself was tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes the color of dark roast coffee. They were observant eyes, the kind that seemed to see more than you wanted them to. "Miss Montgomery," he said, his voice deeper than I'd imagined. He took my hand, his touch brief and respectful. "Welcome to Willow Creek." "It was, eventful," I replied, the image of the dying horse flashing in my mind. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe something else. But it was gone in an instant. "You must be tired," he said, lifting my trunk as if it weighed nothing. "I've prepared a room for you above the store." The town watched my every move. Women whispered behind their hands. Men paused their conversations to stare. I felt like an insect under a magnifying glass. "Don't mind them," Nathaniel said, his voice low. "We don't get many new faces." The general store was cool and dark, smelling of coffee, leather, and tobacco. He led me up a narrow staircase to a small, clean room. Someone had placed a vase of wildflowers on the bedside table. It was a small, unexpected kindness that almost broke me. "I'll leave you to rest," he said from the doorway. "Dinner at the hotel at 6, if you'd care to join me." "I would," I said, surprised by my own sincerity. "Nathaniel," he corrected gently, "if you are to be my wife, you might as well use my given name." He paused. "And I'm Eleonora, though your letters were signed Nora. Which do you prefer?" The question caught me off guard. Eleonora was the doctor, the failure. Nora was the ghost. "Nora," I said. "I prefer Nora." He gave a slight smile. "Nora it is." After he left, I sank onto the bed, the exhaustion of the journey crashing over me. With trembling hands, I opened my trunk and slid back the false bottom. My instruments lay there, wrapped in soft cloth. Tools I had sworn never to use again. A promise I had already broken in my heart back on that dusty road. Outside, the sounds of Willow Creek filtered in. Voices, the nicker of horses, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Horses. They were everywhere. In a town like this, they were life itself. And where there were horses, there would always be disease. I slammed the trunk shut. It wasn't my concern anymore. I wasn't Dr. Eleanor Montgomery. I was just Nora, soon to be Mrs. Reed, a shopkeeper's wife in a town that had never heard of my disgrace. But as I washed the travel dust from my face, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just stepped into a new life. I had stepped into a trap. Dinner at the Willow Creek Hotel was a simple affair, but every set of eyes in the room was on us. Nathaniel seemed oblivious, or maybe just used to it. "You'll meet everyone in time," he said. "Willow Creek isn't large enough for strangers." He told me he'd come here 7 years ago, after serving in an army hospital during the war. He was looking for somewhere quiet. Just as I was about to ask more, a shadow fell over our table. "Well, Nathaniel Reed, aren't you going to introduce us?" The woman was in her 50s, with steel gray hair in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a high-necked black dress that seemed to suck all the light out of the room. Nathaniel's expression became carefully neutral. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is Miss Eleonora Montgomery. Nora, this is Mrs. Martha Sullivan." Her handshake was like a vice grip. "From Boston, I understand," she said, her tone suggesting it was an accusation. A long way to travel for marriage. One might wonder what drives a young woman to such desperate measures. Heat flooded my cheeks. Before I could stammer or reply, Nathaniel spoke, his voice dangerously mild. One might also remember the virtue of hospitality, Mrs. Sullivan. Something flickered in her eyes like he'd touched an old wound. She gave a stiff nod. Well, Miss Montgomery, I hope you find our little town to your liking. We're simple folk. No place for secrets or city ways. With that parting shot, she swept away to join an elderly man who had been watching our exchange with piercing intensity. I apologize, Nathaniel said. Martha can be abrasive. Her husband was the town's veterinarian until his death last year. She hasn't recovered. A veterinarian? I nearly choked. Of all the towns in Texas, I had picked the one mourning its horse doctor. His loss has been felt deeply, Nathaniel continued, glancing toward Martha's table. That's his father with her, Dr. Elijah Sullivan, 88 years old and sharp as a tack. He was a physician, treated men and animals. My appetite vanished. The old man, Dr. Elijah, was still staring at me. His gaze was like a physical touch, probing and analytical. He raised his water glass in a slow, deliberate toast. I felt like he was looking right through me, peeling back the layers of my lies until he saw the disgraced doctor cowering underneath. Don't let them unsettle you, Nathaniel said. But it was too late. The walls were closing in. This town wasn't a refuge. It was a magnifying glass, and I was the specimen pinned beneath it. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. I helped in the store, learning the inventory, serving the cautious, curious townsfolk. Nathaniel remained polite and distant. We shared meals, but our conversations were like two ships passing in the night. Yet I noticed things. The way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. The books on his shelves, medical texts, scientific journals on disease transmission. They were hardly the reading material of a simple shopkeeper. And then there was the locked room. I found it at the end of the hall behind the store, secured with a heavy iron lock. When I asked him about it, his answer was short, almost sharp. Storage, he said. Nothing of interest. But that night I saw a thin line of light from under the door long after midnight. The next morning he looked exhausted. He would disappear for hours, returning with the scent of horses in the open air clinging to his clothes. I told myself it wasn't my business. Our arrangement was practical, not romantic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel Reed was hiding just as many secrets as I was. And I started to wonder which of us was in more danger. The church social was supposed to be my official introduction to Willow Creek Society. Standing under a canopy of oak trees with a cup of watery punch, I watched Nathaniel move through the crowd. He was a quiet man, but people respected him. He's different with you here. I turned to find Dr. Elijah Sullivan beside me, leaning on a polished hickory cane. His eyes were just as sharp as his daughter-in-law's, but held curiosity instead of suspicion. Nathaniel, the old man clarified, he's carried a darkness for years since Rebecca died. You've brought a lightness to him. Rebecca? I asked, though a cold dread was already coiling in my stomach. His wife died 5 years ago. Terrible business. Dr. Elijah's eyes never left my face. He didn't tell you. He mentioned he was a widower, I said carefully. The old doctor made a soft sound. Strange basis for marriage, wouldn't you say? Two people who don't share their pasts. His voice dropped to a whisper. You have interesting eyes, Miss Montgomery. The eyes of someone who has seen too much death. A chill went down my spine. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? His smile was gentle, but it felt like a scalpel, expertly dissecting me. Martha tells me you're from Boston. Fine medical schools there. My hand tightened on my cup. This wasn't a casual chat. It was an interrogation. He knew something, or he suspected. And in a town this small, suspicion was as good as fact. Later, as we walked home, Nathaniel asked, Dr. Elijah seemed interested in your conversation. He was curious about Boston, I said, my voice tight. Nathaniel stopped walking. In the fading light, his expression was unreadable. Nora, he said quietly, whatever brought you to Willow Creek, whatever you're leaving behind, it doesn't matter to me. The kindness in his voice almost broke me. For a second, I wanted to tell him everything. The dead horses, the disgrace, the ghost I was running from, but the words wouldn't come. As we reached the store, a small, ragged boy darted out of the shadows. "Mr. Reed!" he cried, his voice breaking. "Please, sir, it's my dog. She's hurt bad." He held out a whimpering bundle. It was a small puppy, its fur matted with blood from a deep gash along its side. "Caught in barbed wire," the boy, Billy, whispered, tears streaming down his face. Without thinking, I knelt down, my professional instincts taking over. The cut was deep but clean. The puppy was weak, but it could be saved. I looked up and saw Nathaniel watching me, and in his eyes there was no surprise. It was something else. Expectation. "I can help her," I said, the decision made before I even realized it. "But I'll need hot water, clean cloths, and my—" I stopped, catching myself. "Your medical supplies," Nathaniel finished for me, his voice perfectly neutral. My secret was out. I met his gaze, my heart hammering. He didn't ask. He didn't act shocked. He just nodded, unlocked the store, and said, "Billy, bring your dog inside. Nora will take care of her." In the back room, as I worked to clean and suture the wound, Nathaniel assisted me. His hands were steady and sure, following my instructions without a single question. He moved like someone who had done this before. The quiet shopkeeper from Willow Creek held the struggling puppy with the practiced calm of a surgical assistant. After Billy left with his sleeping dog, hope shining in his eyes, the silence between us was deafening. "You're a veterinarian," Nathaniel said. It wasn't a question. "I was," I answered, my hand still. "In Boston. And now? Now I'm here." I waited for the judgment, the suspicion. Instead, he just nodded. "You did a good thing tonight." The simplicity of it was disarming. "Why aren't you surprised?" I asked, unable to hold it in any longer. "The locked room, the medical books. You knew, didn't you? You knew before I even arrived." He met my gaze, and the quiet shopkeeper I thought I knew vanished. In his place was a man with a purpose, a man with a darkness that mirrored my own. "Yes," he said, "I knew. Just when I thought this town couldn't hold any more secrets. I learned the biggest one of all had been waiting for me since the day I arrived." The air in the room crackled. My entire reality in Willow Creek, the fragile sanctuary I thought I had built, was a lie. He had known all along. "Why?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. "Why bring me here under false pretenses?" He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "It's a long story, Nora. Please, come into my study." The study, the locked room. He opened it, and I followed him inside, my mind reeling. The room was a laboratory in miniature. Shelves were crammed not just with books, but with medical journals, charts, and glass vials. In the center of his desk, open, was a book on equine respiratory diseases. My book, published 2 years before the disaster. He saw me looking at it. "That's how I first learned of your work," he said quietly. "Learned of my work?" He finally looked at me, and the grief in his eyes was so profound it stole my breath. "5 years ago, my wife Rebecca died. She was pregnant with our child." He paused, his voice tight. "The doctors called it pneumonia, but it wasn't. The symptoms were wrong. It was aggressive, fast. Before she got sick, she'd been helping at a nearby farm where their horses were ill. They had a strange cough, a fever, what the locals called strangles. My blood ran cold. I started researching," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I found rare cases of the disease jumping to humans, especially those with compromised immune systems. Rebecca was 7 months pregnant." He gestured to the book on his desk. "Your book was one of the few texts that even acknowledged the possibility." A terrible understanding began to dawn. "The Harrington stables," I whispered. "I saw the articles," he said. "Your name. The same disease. They called you negligent, but I wondered if you had seen something they had missed. I believe you were made a scapegoat, Dr. Montgomery. I believe the disease that killed those horses in Boston is the same one that killed my wife." I sank into a chair, the world spinning. He hadn't just chosen me at random. He had sought me out. The mail-order bride advertisement wasn't about finding a wife. It was about recruiting a specialist. "You brought me here to investigate," I said, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. I brought you here because you're the only other person in the world who has seen what this disease can do up close, he corrected. I brought you here because I need your help. Willow Creek has been without a proper vet since Dr. Sullivan died. I knew it was only a matter of time before it showed up here again. And I was right. He was right. The dying horse on the road. The town veterinarian's recent death. It was all connected. This wasn't a refuge. It was a hot zone. And he had lured me right into the middle of it. Before I could even process the full weight of his confession, the door burst open. Sheriff Hayes stood there, his face pale. Reed, we've got trouble. It's Martha Sullivan. She's taken ill. High fever. Can't breathe. He looked from Nathaniel to me. Doc Elijah sent for you both. Says it might be connected to a horse sickness out at the Harper place. The Harper place. The morning after I treated Billy's dog, the boy had returned. His father, Wallace Harper, a stoic rancher, had a mare that was sick. He'd heard about what I'd done for the dog. He asked me to take a look. I had resisted, but Nathaniel had gently pushed, and Billy's hopeful face had sealed the deal. The mare had strangles, the exact same sickness. I had treated her, set up a quarantine, warned Harper to be careful. I thought I was just helping a neighbor. But Nathaniel had engineered it. He had known the Harpers had a sick horse. He put me in a position where I would be forced to use my skills to reveal myself. And now it was spreading, not just among the horses. It had jumped, again. I'll get my bag, I heard myself say, the doctor and me taking over, pushing past the shock and betrayal. As we raced through the darkened streets toward the Sullivan house, a new terrifying thought hit me. Nathaniel didn't just believe his wife's death was a tragedy. He believed it was a murder, and he had brought me here to help him find the killer. Martha Sullivan was fighting for every breath. Her room was hot, filled with the sound of her ragged, wet coughs. Dr. Elijah stood by her bed, his face a mask of grim resolve. "The Boston doctor," Martha rasped, her eyes glassy with fever as I approached. I knew there was something." Her symptoms were terrifyingly familiar. The high fever, the swollen lymph nodes, the rapid respiratory decline. It was the same pattern. "She was at the Harper farm 3 days ago," Dr. Elijah said, "and the Simmons place before that. Another farm with sick horses. The infection was weaving its way through the community like a spider's web." "Sheriff Hayes said there are others," I said, my voice all business. "4 so far," the old doctor confirmed. 2 children who play near the livery stables, a ranch hand from the Simmons farm, and now Martha. It's spreading too fast. Just like it did in Boston, a single case exploding into an epidemic. But this was worse, so much worse. We needed to act. "We need an infirmary," I said, my mind racing. "A central place to isolate and treat the sick. The old schoolhouse." "I'll see to it," Nathaniel said, already moving. "We need to warn the town," I told the sheriff. "Quarantine the affected farms. No one in or out." As they sprang into action, Dr. Elijah caught my arm. "Dr. Montgomery," he said, his voice low and urgent, "this disease, it's been here before. 15 years ago. They covered it up, said it was a swamp fever. 12 people died. 7 of them were children." My blood turned to ice. "A cover-up?" "They suppressed my son's records," he whispered, his eyes haunted. "James knew. He knew it was connected to the horses, but they silenced him." He looked me straight in the eye. "Find his journals. In Martha's study. He documented everything. Don't let them silence you, too." Before I could ask who they were, a messenger arrived, breathless. "It's Wallace Harper," he gasped. "He's sick. And his boy, Billy. He's got the fever, too." First the mayor, now the owner and his son. The disease was cutting a ruthless path through anyone it touched. As Nathaniel and I mounted horses to ride for the Harper farm, the true nature of what we were facing began to sink in. This wasn't just an outbreak. It was a conspiracy. A dark secret that had festered in this town for 15 years. And it was a secret that people were willing to kill to protect. The old schoolhouse became a battlefield. Cots lined the main room, each one holding a victim of the invisible enemy that was tearing through Willow Creek. The air was heavy with the scent of eucalyptus and fear. We had 8 patients by the first night, and more were coming. Wallace Harper was delirious with fever. His son, Billy, lay unnaturally still, his small face flushed, his eyes too bright. It was happening too fast, spreading faster than it had in Boston, faster than it had with Rebecca. It felt different, more aggressive. "I found them," Nathaniel said, appearing at my side. He held a dusty, leather-bound journal. James Sullivan's records from 15 years ago. I took the book, my hands trembling. In a quiet corner, by the light of a single lantern, I opened it. The handwriting was precise, scientific, and the story it told was chilling. May 12, 1870. Another case today. Young Miller boy, same symptoms. That makes 9 human cases, all following contact with infected horses. Councilman Crawford continues to deny the connection. He fears what this knowledge will do to the town's horse trade. At what cost do we keep this secret? 3 have died already. Crawford. The name leaped off the page. James Sullivan had documented it all. He believed the outbreak started after a drought forced the horses to drink contaminated water from an abandoned mine north of town, the old Sullivan mine. "The Sullivan mine," Nathaniel said when I told him, "it's not far from the Harper and Simmons properties. When the creek runs low, animals drink from a pond near the entrance. And we've had a dry spring," I finished for him. It was happening all over again. But there was more. The journal detailed a deliberate cover-up led by Councilman Edward Crawford to protect the town's economy. "Edward Crawford died 5 years ago," Nathaniel said, his voice grim. "But his son William sits on the council now, and he owns the largest horse trading operation in 3 counties. The same family, the same motive, profit over people. We had to get to that mine. We needed proof. We needed samples from the water. But as we prepared to ride out at dawn, word came from the Sullivan house. Martha was fading. She was asking for me. I found her propped against her pillows, her breathing a shallow whisper. "Dr. Montgomery," she gasped. "The journal, did you read it?" "Yes," I said, taking her frail, burning hand. "The mine water," she whispered, her eyes burning with a final, desperate urgency. "It's not just contaminated. It's poisoned. Deliberately." The word hung in the air, venomous and cold. "Mining company," she breathed, each word an immense effort. "Mercury, arsenic, dumped in the spring. James discovered it, had proof. Crawford threatened him, destroyed the evidence." Her grip tightened on my hand. "But James kept one sample, hidden, false bottom of his medical chest. Find it. Don't let them silence you, like they silenced James." Her eyes drifted closed. A few moments later, she was gone. I stood there, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. This changed everything. This wasn't negligence. It wasn't a tragic natural disaster. It was mass murder, covered up for decades. James Sullivan hadn't just been silenced. He'd been investigating a crime. And now so were we. We found the hidden sample, a small glass vial of cloudy water, carefully sealed and dated 15 years prior. Tucked with it were James's notes, chemical analyses, bacterial counts. It was university-level research. With the old sample secured, we rode for the mine. The landscape grew rugged, desolate. A small pond shimmered near the gaping maw of the abandoned mine shaft, looking deceptively peaceful. "The most dangerous things rarely do," Nathaniel said, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. I knelt and took fresh water samples. The metallic tang in the air was undeniable. We had to see inside. Lighting a lantern, Nathaniel led the way into the oppressive darkness. Not 30 feet in, we found them. Rusted, decaying metal drums, half buried in a rockfall. A dark stain seeped from them into a crack in the tunnel floor, a direct line to the underground spring that fed the pond. We had our proof. Just as we turned to leave, we heard the sound of approaching horses. Nathaniel doused the lantern instantly. We were plunged into darkness. Peering from the mouth of the mine, he swore under his breath. "William Crawford," he whispered, "and 2 armed men." There was no other way out. We were trapped. "We confront them," Nathaniel said, his voice low and steady. "Not with violence, with the truth." We stepped out into the blinding sunlight. William Crawford stood by our horses, a smug, satisfied look on his florid face. His two hired guns had rifles at the ready. "Well, well," Crawford said, his tone dripping with false cordiality. "The shopkeeper and the Boston lady. Out for a ride?" "We know, Crawford," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "About the mine, about the chemicals, about what your father did." His smile vanished. "My father protected this town. He poisoned it," I shot back, "for profit, and you let it happen again." Crawford laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "And who's going to believe you? A disgraced veterinarian from Boston? A woman whose negligence killed 5 of the finest horses on the East Coast?" The blow was so personal, so unexpected, it knocked the wind out of me. How? How could he possibly know? "Oh yes, Dr. Montgomery," he sneered. "I've made my own inquiries. Your unfortunate history is no secret. You have no credibility here." Nathaniel stepped in front of me, shielding me. "Enough, Crawford. We have evidence. James Sullivan's preserved sample from 15 years ago. Fresh samples from today. The drums inside the mine. Physical proof." Crawford's confidence wavered, just for a second. He was a gambler and he was trying to read our hand. "We propose a deal," Nathaniel said, pressing the advantage. "You use your influence, fund the infirmary, help contain this outbreak. In return, we focus on the present crisis, not historical culpability." "And the mine is sealed," I added, finding my voice, "permanently." Crawford weighed his options. He was cornered, for now. "Very well," he spat. "You have my cooperation." He mounted his horse, his eyes burning with hate. "But this isn't over, Doctor. Remember that." As they rode away, the silence they left behind was deafening. He knew about Boston. He would use it to destroy me. Back in Dr. Elijah's makeshift lab, the truth under the microscope was even more terrifying. The heavy metal contamination wasn't just poisoning the water. It was causing the bacteria to mutate. It was becoming stronger, more virulent, better at jumping from animals to humans. It was evolving. "It's a perfect storm," I explained to Nathaniel and Dr. Elijah. "The chemicals, the bacteria, the drought conditions that concentrate it all. A biological weapon created by corporate greed." Just then, Sheriff Hayes burst in. "We've got trouble at the schoolhouse," he said. "Harper's taken a turn for the worse. And we just got 3 new cases, all from the Crawford ranch." The irony was sickening. Crawford's own men were now victims. He couldn't hide from this. The schoolhouse was a vision from a nightmare. The new patients were declining faster than the others. The mutated bacteria was more aggressive. And Wallace Harper, he was slipping away. Billy sat by his cot, a small, silent sentinel, clutching his father's hand. His case was too advanced. Our current treatments weren't enough. I had to do something drastic. Drawing on my research, on treatments that had shown promise in the most severe equine cases, I prepared a new, experimental compound. It was risky. I had never tested it on a human. "What is it?" Dr. Elijah asked, watching me. "A gamble," I said. "An attempt to reduce the inflammation in his lungs while supercharging his body's ability to fight the infection." We administered the treatment. For an hour, nothing. Then almost imperceptibly, his breathing eased. It wasn't a cure, but it was a reprieve, a fighting chance. As night fell, Nathaniel and I sat on the schoolhouse steps, exhausted. He finally told me about Rebecca, about the school she started, the plans they had, the light she brought into his life. He told me how finding my book, my research, had been the first glimmer of hope in years of darkness. "I didn't intend to deceive you, Nora," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But when I saw the articles about you, I saw a chance. To bring you here, to offer you a fresh start, and to find the truth." "I understand," I said, and to my own surprise, I meant it. Just then, a scream from inside shattered the night. We rushed in to find one of the Crawford ranch hands convulsing, his body rigid with fever. The disease was fighting back. It was getting stronger. "We have to present our findings to the council now," I told Nathaniel. "We can't wait." As he left to organize the meeting, a cold dread washed over me. Crawford hadn't just made a deal at the mine. He had retreated to plan a new attack. And I knew with sickening certainty that I would be his target. This wasn't just a fight to save a town. It was a fight for my life. The town hall felt like an arena. On one side, me, Nathaniel, and Dr. Elijah. On the other, William Crawford, flanked by two expensive-looking lawyers from Austin. The council members sat between us, looking like men awaiting their own execution. The room was packed with townsfolk, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. Crawford spoke first, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He painted a picture of a natural tragedy, an unfortunate act of God. Then he turned his attention to me. This woman, he boomed, pointing a finger, arrived in our town under a cloud of disgrace. She concealed the fact that her medical license was revoked in Boston for gross negligence. He held up a sheaf of papers. I have the official records right here. She used our town's suffering as an opportunity to conduct reckless experiments on our most vulnerable citizens. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was good. He was twisting the truth, making my desperate attempts to save lives sound like monstrous acts. And to prove the seriousness of this matter, Crawford declared, playing his trump card, I have brought with me Dr. Arthur Pembroke, an official representative of the Massachusetts Medical Board. A severe-looking man stood up. My heart stopped. Crawford hadn't just come to discredit me. He'd come to have me arrested. Dr. Montgomery, the mayor said, his voice trembling, do you wish to respond? I rose, my legs shaking. Every eye was on me. This was it. The moment my past finally caught up and devoured my future. What Mr. Crawford says, I began, my voice steadier than I felt, is a carefully constructed lie, built around a kernel of truth. I admitted to my past, to the revoked license. I owned it. Then I dropped the bombshell. What Mr. Crawford fails to mention is that the owners of those stables in Boston, the Harrington family, were also the silent partners in the Sullivan mine. A gasp went through the room. Crawford's face went white. Dr. Elijah stepped forward presenting his son's letters. My son James warned Edward Harrington about this disease 15 years ago. He was ignored, and then he was silenced, just as they are trying to silence Dr. Montgomery now. The evidence was undeniable. The letters, the chemical analyses, the rusted drum fragments laid out on the table. It was a story of decades-long corporate malfeasance. The mayor turned to the man from the medical board. Dr. Pembroke, what is your assessment? Dr. Pembroke stood, clearing his throat. I held my breath. I was sent here to investigate unauthorized medical practice, he said, his voice measured. However, having reviewed the evidence and interviewed patients, I must conclude that Dr. Montgomery's actions, while unorthodox, were both necessary and effective. Furthermore, he continued, looking directly at Crawford, this new evidence suggests a significant injustice may have been done in her original case. I will be recommending a full review by the board. It was a stunning reversal. Crawford was sputtering, his lawyers shuffling papers, but the final blow came from the back of the room. Wallace Harper, pale but steady on his feet, stood up. I was dying, he said, his voice ringing with authority. Dr. Montgomery saved my life. She saved my boy from being an orphan. And you, he said, pointing at Crawford, want to punish her to protect your family's fortune? One by one, others stood. Patients who had recovered. Volunteers who had worked by my side. Their voices rose in a chorus of support. Then a small figure made his way to the front of the room. It was Billy Harper. In his hand was his slate. He held it up for everyone to see. In large, careful letters it read, "She is a hero. Heroes tell the truth." The room erupted. The council, seeing the tide turn so decisively, voted to authorize a full investigation. Crawford, defeated and exposed, practically fled the building. I had won. We had won. In the aftermath, as I stood on the steps of the town hall, Nathaniel beside me, I felt a sense of dizzying relief. Dr. Pembroke promised to fight for my reinstatement. The town was safe. The truth was out. But just when I thought the battle was over, the war took one last vicious turn. Days later, as the last patients were leaving the schoolhouse, a ranch hand came galloping into town, his horse lathered. "It's Billy," he yelled. "He's sick again. The fever, the breathing. It's the same." My blood ran cold. It wasn't possible. The mine was sealed. The water was clean. How? We raced to the Harper farm. The boy was burning up, his symptoms identical to his father's. He hasn't been anywhere near the mine, Wallace insisted, frantic with worry. He's been right here on the farm. Something didn't add up. Then I remembered what Wallace had told me. Billy had started speaking again just before he got sick. And where had he been? In the old storage shed, finishing my gift. The shed was dusty, filled with forgotten junk. But in the back corner, under a loose floorboard, we found it. A hidden cache. More of James Sullivan's research, letters, and dozens of small glass vials containing soil and water samples. Samples his mother, Sarah, had helped him collect and had hidden after his death. Several of the vials were broken. The dried concentrated bacteria, potent after years of mutation, had become an invisible dust. Billy, working in the shed, had inhaled it, a direct exposure to a weaponized version of the disease. We knew the enemy now. We knew its strength. For 2 agonizing days, we fought for Billy's life, using everything we had learned. On the morning of the 3rd day, his fever broke. He opened his eyes clear and lucid. "Dr. Nora," he whispered, "Mama's secret boxes. Was it real?" "It was real, Billy," I said, my voice thick with tears. "Your mother was a hero, too." The crisis was finally, truly over. A few weeks later, a telegram arrived from Boston. My license was fully reinstated. The Harrington family was under investigation. I was asked to return to testify, to go back to the life that had been stolen from me. That evening, I walked with Nathaniel by the creek. "If I went back," I asked, "would you come with me?" He stopped and took my hands. "I would follow you anywhere, Nora. But the question is, where do you truly want to be?" Boston represented my past, vindicating it was important. But my future? It wasn't in the cold gray world that had cast me out. It was here, under the endless Texas sky. It was in the new clinic the town was building. It was with the quiet, steady man who had seen the healer in me when all I could see was a killer. It was with the small boy who had found his voice and helped me find mine. "I have to go to Boston," I said, my voice clear and certain, "to close that chapter. But then, I'm coming home." "No, The smile that lit up his face was like the first sunrise after a long, dark storm. "Then that's what we'll do," he said, "together." And in that moment, I knew I wasn't running from ghosts anymore. I was finally home. The journey was long, the cost was high, but we had faced the darkness and won. We had uncovered the truth. We had brought justice to the forgotten, and we had healed a community. And in doing so, I had finally healed myself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the strange and mysterious. And let me know in the comments below, what would you have done in my shoes?